Welcome in to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry, hosting to you the best politics podcast west of I-35 in the great state of Texas. So happy for that you're here to join me in a great conversation of the day. Now, before I get into the content, let's remember a couple things. Please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or on Spotify. You can also like and subscribe on YouTube, where you get to see this video and hit that notifications bell to where you never miss a new post. You never miss that. All right. So just wanted to throw that out there. Also wanted to let you know as to what we're dealing with today. We're going to talk about I'm going to get into about the 14th Amendment and the very concept and analysis over the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. I'm also going to talk about the president's recent trip to Europe, to Switzerland, and the whole whatever that was about, his recent polling numbers and what that means for the midterms, possibly at this moment. And we'll wrap up with some more polling numbers, but on the U.S. Senate race here in Texas and why that's been so all over the place. Okay, so with that said, let's get into it here. So when we talk about the 14th Amendment and why this was even being brought up, well, let's understand there's a long-standing conversation about what the 14th Amendment's about, and it's this very concept, the very practice of what's known as birthright citizenship. This comes from the 14th Amendment, Section 1, and the first sentence as it reads, and I'm going to read it to you here from straight from the Constitution. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. So that is the first sentence of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution that dictates birthright citizenship. Okay? It's pretty clear. I mean, not everything in the Constitution is crystal clear. Not everything in the Constitution is also like incredibly broad, where you need some decoder ring to figure out what's there. There are things that are broad and need to go along with context and of society. There's also things that are pretty clear, and this is one of those instances where it's pretty clear. You're born in the United States. You're a citizen of the United States and the state wherein you reside. It's pretty cut dry, open shut case here. But the problem that many people want to bring out is this other verbiage in this sentence that reads, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So what they're trying to bring out here is that if you were here in the United States, but you're not here on a legal basis, and therefore you might give birth while you're here in the U.S., that child, according to those who argue this, say that child is not a U.S. citizen. Whereas the very wording here says that they are. So they say, well, because of that, you're not subject to the jurisdiction of that state or of that country. So we're going to spend some time looking at this. And I'm just going to give you a spoiler alert. That interpretation is incorrect. Until the Supreme Court says one way or another, the general understanding, the accepted understanding throughout the United States and every other scholar of the Constitution will tell you that is clear, that if you're born here, you're a citizen here. And you are a resident and a citizen of the state in which you reside, in which you were born. So it's just, so that's the ongoing interpretation that everybody really just kind of clings on to, that kind of has understood it. And the ones who don't, the ones who are challenging this, have that part where they read, well, subject to the jurisdiction. So this has been an ongoing thing for some time. And for the last maybe 15 years, the idea that it wasn't this was deemed a bit of a fringe concept, that it was a fringe, just outside of the mainstream thought, outside of the mainstream interpretation, that somehow that you're not, that if you're born here, you're somehow not a citizen of the United States. And so let's understand what all that they're really talking about. And I'm going to bring you an article here from the Heritage Foundation that was published, as I mentioned to you, 14 years ago. This comes from one of their authors. His name is Hans A. von Spakovsky, who is at the time was a legal fellow for the Heritage. And so what he's going to write here is somehow, let's understand what he's going to say, that the accepted and long-standing interpretation of the 14th Amendment is somehow wrong. And I'm going to read it in part from his piece. I'll link it in the episode. And he reads here that the 14th Amendment doesn't say that all persons born in the U.S. are citizens. It says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. And he makes a little jab here. It says the second critical conditional phrase is conveniently ignored or misinterpreted by advocates of birthright citizenship. And he puts that in quotations, birthright citizenship. Critics erroneously believe that anyone present in the United States has subjected himself to the jurisdiction of the U.S., which would extend citizenship to children of tourists, diplomats, and illegal aliens alike. Again, these are his words, not mine. But according to him, he goes on to argue but this is not what the qualifying phrase means. Its original meaning refers to the political allegiance of an individual and the jurisdiction that a foreign government has over that individual. The fact that a tourist or illegal alien is subject to our laws and our courts, if they violate our laws, does not place them within the political jurisdiction of the United States. Okay, that's that's funny. So he goes on to argue here that John Eastman, of course, whenever John Eastman is being thrown out here, that this is a wild goose chase. Former dean of the Chapman School of Law said many do not seem to understand the distinction between partial territorial jurisdiction with subjects, all who are present within the territory of a sovereign to the jurisdiction of the sovereign's laws, and complete political jurisdiction, which requires allegiance to the sovereign as well. Of course, he cites here the slaughterhouse cases of 1872. The qualifying phrase was extended to exclude children of ministers, consuls, and citizens or subjects of foreign states born within the U.S. Okay? Meaning, if those who are not subject to the jurisdiction are people who serve other countries. So we're talking people like your foreign consulates, the ambassadors, okay? They themselves and the children of them. Okay, interesting, because they have a set of immunity. Okay, they're not always set up to always be subject to the jurisdiction of our laws. And then he makes this crazy connection to say that was upheld in the 1898 case about U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark, which he says that's the one where all these birthright citizenship supporters really say here. But even then, he was born to permanent residence. Well, let's just look at the basis of that case, the basis of U.S. versus Wong Kim Ark. And here's the facts of the case. This was argued in 1897. It was decided in 1898. The Chinese Exclusion Act denied citizenship to Chinese immigrants. Moreover, by treaty, no Chinese subject in the U.S. could become a naturalized citizen. Wong Kim Ark was born in San Francisco to parents who were both Chinese citizens who resided in the U.S. at the time. At age 21, he, being Wong Kim Ark, returned to China to visit his parents, who had previously resided in the U.S. for 20 years. When he returned to the U.S., Wong was denied entry on the ground that he was not a citizen. And so the question was, is a child who was born in the U.S. to Chinese citizen parents who are lawful permanent residents, are they under the citizenship clause. And what they say here, and the answer is a resounding yes. It was a 6-2 majority that citizenship of children born in the U.S. to non-citizens. All right, that is what citizenship clause is extended to. All right, that is it's pretty clear. It's not just to people who were born to U.S. citizens. It's not just to people who were born to permanent U.S. residents. It's not just to people who become U.S. citizens. It's to people who were born to non-U.S. citizens. If you're born in this country, you are therefore a citizen of the United States. And Mr. Stravosky does not buy into that. This ongoing conversation that is only meant to weaken the very concept of the citizenship clause, birthright citizenship, in the 14th Amendment. Now, you'll also hear people argue that, well, what was the purpose of the 14th Amendment? Why was that even brought up? Well, let's understand that this was in response to a landmark case known as Scott versus Sanford. This is often referred to as the Dred Scott decision, okay? Where in that decision, the Supreme Court under Chief Justice Roger Taney ruled that black people, whether free or enslaved, were not citizens, but a separate class of persons. The decision, what this does here is that it protected the institution of slavery and defined the enslaved people as property, and said that discriminatory laws that denied equal citizenship were going to be upheld. So that's the basis for this, is that, okay, look, Dred Scott is going, that whole decision makes it to where former slaves, current slaves, at the time when this was being decided in 1857, will never be citizens. So here comes the 14th Amendment that's ratified in the late 1860s and says, if you're born here and you're subject to our laws, you're a citizen. So this overturns the Dred Scott decision that, yes, you are a U.S. citizen if you are subject to our laws and you are born and you reside in our country. That's the basis of it. So when they talk about originalism within the 14th Amendment, it was meant to overturn Dred Scott. That's the point of it. It established the principle of birthright citizenship, meaning a person born in the U.S. is automatically a citizen. All right? It did not apply, however, to Native Americans because they don't legally become U.S. citizens until the Citizenship Act of 1924. Because there was another ruling, but after Dred Scott, that said Native Americans are subject to another set of legal they are bound by another set of rules, another governing body. So what the 14th Amendment does is that it brings citizenship to African Americans, former slaves. Okay? That's the purpose of it. Now, just because that's the purpose of it doesn't mean it ends there. Let's be honest about that. Okay? Now, people think that there's been this gigantic influx of people coming here illegally, just having babies so that they can, up the population. I mean, you get so down the rabbit hole with this conspiracy theory crap. And this is where, this is where the right just goes absolutely bonzo bonkers nuts and says things like, well, it's good that states are, Texas gerrymander because, this whole plan to just, bring in all these people from Mexico and all these other illegal aliens for Democrats to help them vote and then to really pad the 2020 census. That just means that, so first of all, I have to fact check all this, and it's really tiring, folks. It really is. It's exhausting to tell people how wrong they are almost all the time. I have to remind people who was president in 2020. Donald Trump. I have to remind people about the results of the 2020 census, where there was a tremendous undercount of the very population that they were fearful of whom they were afraid. A tremendous undercount. Meaning they didn't fill out the census. Meaning they weren't legal to. So that whole thing is just completely dismissed within a matter of 15 seconds. What the heck are you thinking? How dumb. So we look at the birthright citizenship issue. I just debunked this whole subject to the jurisdiction thereof thing. And look, let me just take it one step further. We have laws here about immigration laws, about who can be here and who can't, and the process for it and all that. And whether or not we agree with what ICE is doing, a majority of Americans have already said that they don't, and that they've gone too far. And even, that's just coming back time and time again. And it's not a partisan issue. You're finding a majority of independent voters, those who claim to be independent voters, are saying that too, that they've gone too far. You have a tremendous amount of Latino voters who once supported the president in 2024 who are saying that they don't like what ICE is doing either. Again, all that stuff's backed up by facts, by polling numbers. You can go find that. I'm not making this up. So all that aside, there's an argument to be made that ICE is going after people who broke the law. Well, if they're not subject, I just want people who don't believe this, who don't believe that those who come here illegally, those who are tourists, those who are somehow are not subject to our laws, to answer the question, then why is ICE arresting people? If they're not subject to our laws, and we are not subject to others' laws, then why are there people who are being punished for breaking our laws? That's an ongoing question that nobody answers. The Heritage Foundation article here just kind of just tosses that aside and goes, that doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really mean anything. And so, it doesn't directly answer that or even address that issue. It doesn't do it because they don't have an answer for it, because they know it's wrong. I'm often reminded of the college student in the mid-1990s who went to Singapore, broke the law, had to stay in jail, and was even caned. You can Google the Singapore caning. Okay? Like this was real. This happened. And we were in an uproar. How dare you do that? How dare you do that to an American citizen? Oh, they dared because he broke the law. Okay? When we go to another country, we are subject to their laws. But somehow, to people who wrote articles or analyzed things for the Heritage Foundation, and these other people who write for the Washington Times and the Washington Examiner and all these other right-wing fascist rags, all these other just awful publications that aren't worth a lick, come back and say, well, they're not really subject to our laws. Well, then why are we arresting people who apparently broke our laws, and apparently came from a different country, and apparently are running amok? According to their side, if you listen to their rhetoric, you walk down the street, you'll see some trans people trying to get an abortion in an alley while you stumble over an illegal immigrant who's going to hold you hostage. My gosh. Have you heard this kind of crap? And so, of course, they're going to just amplify the stereotype here. Of course they do that. Are we not a nation of laws? Well, of course we are. Nothing is above the Constitution. No one is above the Constitution, even though Congress needs to realize that at times. But I'm just puzzled whenever there's something clearly written here, and I've outlined to you as to how people who come here are subject to our laws, are somehow disregarded for the ability to have citizenship. I just don't understand that. I don't know. And it's something that is just I'll never get. The Supreme Court has heard the arguments. They have a ruling. They just haven't released it yet. We're expected for them to have that. The president wants to get rid of birthright citizenship. And this is why this is even coming to a case. President Donald Trump just says there's no such thing as birthright citizenship, which has been a fringe right idea for the last 30, 40 years. And now it's coming to be part of the mainstream of the conservative movement. I don't understand. I just simply don't. I'm trying to wrap my head around as to why this is a thing. But, I don't have to. Because I know what's on my side, and I know what's on the side of facts, and that's the Constitution. I mean, it's pretty clear. But one other thing I want to mention here, before I move on to something else, is when we talk about interpreting the Constitution, look, there's a lot of ways to do that. I usually like to just look at two major, very basic ways, which is what's called strict constructionism and the living document. Strict constructionism would argue that you interpret what's there, that it's the letter of the law. You don't interpret what's not there. Right? Whereas the living documentist would say, not everything in here is incredibly clear. A lot of everything is broad, and you have to apply even the very crystal clear things to the context of the time and follow the spirit of the law. All right? And that's kind of where the two are. Again, there's other methods of interpreting the Constitution. I'm just looking at two very basic types here. Usually, the living document way of interpreting the Constitution is a liberal manner. That's a liberal way. And strict construction is more of a conservative manner. Well, ever since the president just doesn't really care about this stuff, he's been on, I just want it to be whatever that I want it to be. He's now saying here, well, you really have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to get to the end here. So this is really not really, this isn't really about birthright citizenship. It isn't really, just because you're born here doesn't make you a citizen. What? He is just so surrounded by goofball, unserious interpretations and interpreters of the Constitution who just say, oh, yeah, sure. It's just totally he's just lost all base of reality on this. Now, because the Supreme Court heard it, now we're actually having a mainstream conversation, which is bothersome because it shouldn't be. This should be a 9-0 case to say that if you're born here, you're a U.S. citizen. End of story, open, shut, the end, move on. But it's so interesting to me when I see the right that has long been on the conversation of strict construction, strict construction, strict construction, now trying to make a mountain out of a molehill. Now they're trying to do the living document. Well, you really got to look at the words, and you really got to think about what that means today. And okay, can we do the same thing to the Second Amendment? And as much Second Amendment as I am, I'm a gun owner, and I was at one time a member of the NRA. Not anymore, but I was. Even at that, let's make something clear. There's a lot of ways to interpret the Second Amendment if you're using the same logic as President Trump. If you're using the same logic as people from the Heritage Foundation, as people who are telling him, well, it doesn't really mean that you can really look at it this way and you can really go the other way. And heavens no. It's be consistent is what I'm asking the newfound right to actually be. I mean, come on, people. I never thought that the right would now be on the side of living document, would be adopting this aspect of living document. I never thought that would happen. So I'm a bit, it's a bit of a stunner. Interesting. Nor would I even think that the liberal side or the left would be on the side of strict construction. Got to say that too. But if you have read this document and you have any sense about yourself, what's clear to me is that not everything is clear. Not all the time. There's times when it is, there's times when there's not. And the 14th Amendment is clear that birthright citizenship means that one, it exists. There's no need for quotation marks. 2, if you're born here, you're a U.S. citizen. That's pretty clear. I never understood the whole other conversation about, well, something else, and this, and what about that. I've never bought into that. I've never understood it, nor will I. Okay. So the next part here that I wanted just to spend just a little bit of time on was the president's time in Europe. He went to Davos, Switzerland this past week, and I watched most of his speech that he gave to this force, this council, whoever he was talking to. And it was a typical Trump speech. He had no idea what he was talking about. He rambled and rambled and rambled. He went back to even say that the 2020 election was rigged, that the media isn't fair to him, that we gave Greenland, that we should never have gave Greenland back to Denmark, and this, it's just you just got to shake your head here and go, what is this guy talking about? I mean, even if you were like an independent Republican-leaning guy, just the average guy who goes, I didn't really like the last 4 years under Biden. Prices were a bit too high. I'm not entirely thrilled about Kamala. I can go back to Trump. Let's just see how. I mean, I know what he is. Let me just see. You got way more than what you bargained for, and by way more, I mean way worse. I mean, this president likes to call his predecessor and / successor, I guess, Sleepy Joe. I've never, and you've heard me say this before, I've never seen Biden fall asleep in a meeting. Well, Drew, his advisors really handled him. Well, good. The president shouldn't be on national TV falling asleep. I thought the president was going to fall asleep in that speech he gave. It was so exhausting, even he sounded exhausted. I mean, dozing Don is what he needs to be called. Forget Sleepy Joe. Dozing Don. This guy's dozing off everywhere. And he sounds like just so tired every time he talks. Like, Family Guy did this thing over Bob Dole. I don't know if those of you who might remember the 1996 presidential campaign, Bob Dole, decorated World War II veteran, had a lot of respect in the U.S. Senate. Said a lot of things about, he referred to himself a lot in the third person. Bob Dole. So Family Guy did this thing to where he ended up falling asleep, saying his name in the third person. Oh, just Bob Dole. I thought the president was going to do that. I thought Trump was going to, the election was stolen. He was going to doze off in the middle of this. It was just a complete ramble fest. After about 45 minutes of listening to it, I was exhausted. I couldn't deal with it because it's the same stuff every single time. He might go up there with a teleprompter with a script, but he doesn't want to read it. I'll just say whatever I want. Quite frankly, because I think he wants to be just as surprised as everyone else is as to what comes out of his mouth. I just don't think that he is much of he has much preparation. The only reason he won 2024 was because he listened to his advisors. It's the only reason. They finally got him to stop talking about being electrocuted and shark attacks and Hannibal Lecter. All these weird things that just made people go, "What are you talking about?" His staff finally got him to wrangle in and just, not have him out as much. And so there he was out there just rambling on about how, he needs to, how it's the invested interest of the United States to have Greenland. That's all I've heard. I've never heard an actual argument as to why that's meaningful for us. Like why we get that. Well, it's for the Golden Dome, Drew. What? When was the last time we needed a Golden Dome? And is Canada okay with this? Well, we're going to take over Canada. Oh, we are. That's next. Cuba. The president wants to get rid of the whole Castro legacy, that whole lineage. We know that. He's put everybody in the Western Hemisphere on notice. He's truly bringing out the Monroe Doctrine, and he's truly trying to make the world before it was World War I. Not World War II, before World War I. And you just have to shake your head and go, is anybody going to have the cojones to say, that's a stupid idea? Is anybody in Congress with an R next to their name is going to say, that is the dumbest thing in the world, other than those who are leaving? Marjorie Taylor Greene, former Congresswoman, that would really call them out over the Epstein files. Which, by the way, that's what all of this is a distraction from. By the way, that's what all this is distracting. Let me look at. Let's bring back Greenland. Let's bring Greenland back again. So people will talk about how crazy that is for me to do that, just so people don't talk about Epstein. Let's talk about Let me ramble about something dumb, and people will talk about how I've lost all sense. So people don't talk about Epstein. No farm bill. The rural areas are getting raked over the coals because of our water and these AI data centers. And to take land and to take our water and then be hooked up to our grids to raise our energy prices. Yeah. Don't address that, but by God, talk about Greenland. That is so stupid. But that's what he was rambling on about, and how everyone needs to just let me have it. And I should have I should have got the Nobel Peace Prize. I stopped 8 wars. He didn't stop 8 wars. Okay? Nobody wants to fact check this guy because they're so afraid that he's going to, I don't know, spit on him, throw ketchup on him. I mean, sue him? For what? They don't know. But that was the whole speech. We need Greenland. Got to have Greenland. No, we don't. And if you're a Republican running for office here, you got to look at his poll numbers. And they aren't good. They are not good at all. Real Clear Politics has his average less than 43%. It's actually at 42.5%. At the time that I'm recording this, it was at 42.5%, with the latest poll coming from the New York Times and Siena College. New York Times has the president's approval at 40%, 56% disapproval. That is a negative 16% spread. I mean, that's just, I mean, how he has any sort of control over Republican politics is beyond me. And then you look at the greater breakdown that the Times gives out here, asking the question, do you think the country is generally better off than it was a year ago, about the same or worse off? Almost half say that it was worse off. Only about a third say that it's better off. And it's not just Democrats who say that. Over half of independents say that. When you look at the approval and disapproval of his job as president, again, 40 in favor, 56 disapprove. The only positive that the president has is the border. And this is what it was. 50% of respondents, and it wasn't even a majority, it was just half. 50% of respondents said they approve of the president's job between the border of U.S. and Mexico. 46% disagreed. They disapproved. When it comes to managing the federal government, Venezuela, immigration, the economy, our relationship with other countries, Palestine and Israel, cost of living, Ukraine-Russia war, Epstein files, all underwater. And they're not even close. These are double digits on all of those. Negative 14% on managing the federal government. Negative 13% on Venezuela. 17% on immigration. Negative 18% on the economy. Negative 19% on our allies. Negative 17% on Israel-Palestine. Negative 29% on cost of living. Negative 24% on Russia-Ukraine. Negative 44% on Epstein. What in the world is going on here? And then the Times asked this. This is such a stupid question. Would you say that Donald Trump is on track to be one of the best presidents, an above-average president, an average president, below-average president, or one of the worst? Well, 45% of Republicans say that he's going to be one of the best presidents ever. 12% of independents say he will too. 1% of Democrats say that he will be. Okay. Above average, almost a third. 32% of Republicans say he'll be an above-average president. They don't even have that much faith in him. 14% of independents say that, 1% of Democrats. An average president, this is where you get a lot, well, your second highest number of independents. 16% of independents say he'll be an average president. 9 Republicans, 3 Democrats. Below average, 15% of independents say that he'll be below average, but one of the worst. 43% of independents say he'll be one of the worst. 4% of Republicans say Trump will be one of the worst. And, of course, there's a big majority of Democrats who say he'll be one of the worst. This is just some really awful polling numbers. But not everybody, there are those who are pretty much in line with him, who love everything about him. One is a real estate broker from Dedham, Mass. He says, I think he must be doing something right when there's so many people opposed to him. And then he goes on to say this. He goes, I mean, Donald Trump could look me in the face and tell me to go screw myself, and I'd say thank you. I think that's good. I don't think he's looking to kiss everybody's ass. I think he's going to do what he thinks is the right thing, and I think that's a positive thing. The last part, okay, fine, I can understand that. But saying that if Donald Trump looked you in the face and told you to go screw yourself, you'd say thank you? What? Oh, goodness. I mean, these are just not good numbers at all. I'm trying to find here if when it comes to do you support the president running? I'm sorry. Do you support or oppose the U.S. running Venezuela? 64% of respondents said I oppose that. Now, if you want to know the methodology here, this was based off 1,625 registered voters nationwide, and between 12 to 17%. I'm sorry, between January 12th to January 17th. Okay. So, no, the president does not have good marks. The president does not have good numbers. And then we found out yesterday that the president and his team are wanting to go once a week around the country to campaign for the Republicans for the midterm. Why? If I was a Republican right now, I'd say I don't need you right now. Now, if I was in a contested primary, okay, I might need you. But if I'm good, hey, why don't you come back maybe during the summer? Now, here's what I always have to say this, and my paid subscribers, which you can be too, hear this to the nth degree. Public opinion is fluid. It can change. The economy can change. Things can change to where the president's numbers can go up. And them being so far down, there's only one place for them to go. But if things don't improve, if the economy doesn't improve, and if Democrats are smart enough to campaign on the economy and just let that be part, like 95% of what they talk about, I don't care how much gerrymandering is going to happen. I mean, you can try to bring up all the red walls that you want with these gerrymandering schemes. I don't think that's going to work. And that's pretty scary if you're a Republican running for re-election. These are not good numbers, but again, let's remember here, as I just said, these things can change. Let's also note that this is in January. The Texas primary is less than 2 months away. It's about 45 days away. We start early voting in less than a month here in Texas. But across the country, whose primaries are later in the year, you're kind of hoping that maybe these numbers can get better. And then by the summer, you're hoping that these numbers can get better. But if you're looking at this and it's like, around Labor Day and he hasn't cracked 50%, or he hasn't gotten close to 50%, like if he's still hovering around 45% by Labor Day, it's hard to come back from something like that. Hard to come back from something like that. Now, transitioning now into our last segment, I wanted to look at some competing polling numbers that you may have heard from the Democratic side on the U.S. Senate race. There's an Emerson poll that has James Tallarico up by 8 or 9. And And that was released just earlier in like last week, I think. And so that's good news for him. But at the same time, we heard not too long ago, earlier, later in the week, that Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett released a poll that says she's up by 13. Now, the Crockett campaign has resources, and they did what's known as internal polling. And they did something on, I want to say like 1,000 likely Democratic voters. The Emerson poll that had Tallarico up had 413 likely Democratic primary voters. And among those, Tallarico actually had a 9-point lead. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. And I think you probably already know it. But Tallarico and Crockett really believe that John Cornyn is not going to win his primary. They really believe that Kim Paxton's going to win this thing. And that's what they're hoping for. They are legit hoping that Kim Paxton wins this seat, that he wins this race. Because, let's just be honest here, Republicans may not like John Cornyn, but a lot of Texas voters do. And John Cornyn hasn't lost an election. So I think it's quite clear that there's some strategy involved here. This isn't just some sort of maybe they'll do it, maybe. No, the Democrats, Crockett and Tallarico, both are counting on Cornyn not being the Republican nominee. I'm telling you right now, Cornyn could win. I mean, that's a slam dunk victory for the Republicans. I don't know why you'd want to mess with that. It's a sure thing. Paxton is not a sure thing. At this level, he has little to no idea what he's doing here. Because whoever emerges as the Democratic nominee, there's going to be a lot of pros who are going to come on here. I would imagine there'd be some high-profile political operatives who'd be joining that campaign to say, you need to spend more money here. You need some more ad time here. You need some more mailers here. You need this. I don't doubt that. Let's change the narrative. It's going to come out. That stuff's going to be there. Paxton is so unpredictable. He's just so, and when I say unpredictable, I mean undisciplined. I mean, one of my friends, I consider him a friend, but he's also one of the leading political scientists on this, about scandals. Brandon Rottinghouse, out of University of Houston, has written that perhaps scandals don't really matter as much as they used to. And I think he's got a great point. I think that might play out here. But I think if you're able to find a way to attach that to money, and that's part of his research, that if it's a recent money issue, then voters tend to really care. So if you're able to find some way to where this is a monetary issue with Paxton's many different affairs, which, that makes me laugh. Paxton having affairs. But outside of that, I don't really see a lot of Republicans getting excited about Ken Paxton. He's never led a ticket. He's always ridden on the coattails of others. And if the president is still unpopular, if he's still about where he is now, come 10 months later, it's not going to be a fun election for Ken Paxton. Yes, there are more Republican voters than Democratic voters. But there's also a lot of independents who might be able to, who may have not voted for a Democrat in a while, who may actually say, you know what, I'd rather go with Tallarico, or I'd rather go with Crockett. I think that's the matchup that the Democrats are hoping for. They want Paxton to be the nominee. They want him. I'm often reminded here, be careful what you wish for. But that said, the Democratic primary here, and every time I talk about this, I always get on a diatribe. I always get on this little tangent about Ken Paxton. He's kind of really became like my favorite politician because he's done that to himself. But when you look at the Democratic primary, all the polling that's being released here has been really volatile, which means we have no idea about where this race is going. And we'll eventually just find out in March. It's essentially where we're going to find out here. All right. One other thing I wanted to mention to you is that former NFL sideline reporter for NBC, Michelle Tafoya, has made it clear that she's going to run for the open Senate seat in Minnesota, because Democratic Senator Tina Smith is going to retire, and Michelle Tafoya, who's now become a bit of a figure on the right, is going to take up that mantle for the Republicans. She's got some name recognition. She might be able to really fundraise here. That's going to be a key thing for her. Republicans typically haven't done well in Minnesota outside of winning, governorships over the last 30 years or so. But it's a possibility. I mean, you never say never. I mean, as deep blue as Minnesota is, it could take a lightning rod, a lightning bolt of an issue, and a candidate to harness that to really make headway with voters. But I'm looking at this picture that that roll call has of her. I mean, it's a really good picture, and if I was her campaign, I'd use this. It looks like she's on the stage, singing a song. It's very rock star like. It's I might be able to put it on, stitch it up here for you, but she's been a bit of a lightning rod for the Republicans. Really, been a galvanizing figure on the whole DEI woke transgender thing, and she's talking about that. It needs to be said here. That has legs for maybe a week. I mean, just ask voters in Virginia. Just ask voters in New Jersey. Okay? How'd that work out for them? So, if you're going to go into a deep blue state and talk about how bad the policies are in that deep blue state, you got to come with a lot more than that. And it's got to be a lot more than just the trans issues and it's got to be a lot more than your social issues. You got to hit harder on things like the economy and all that stuff. But, party of the president doesn't typically do well in midterms. That's been political science for a very long time. And I don't know if a star like Michelle Tafoya can actually do this. I mean, when these big-name celebrities get involved in races, especially just in general, they don't usually do well. I mean, how did Dr. Oz do? How did Herschel Walker do? Michelle Tafoya has to look at those as key examples. But she's going to have the backing of the Republican Senate committee. They're going to be, backing her, giving her money, pointing her to the right people and all this sort of thing. So, good for her. We'll see how well this turns out. Not sure at the moment about the Democrat who might be running there, but that's got to be on the lean Democratic side. Okay. Last thing I wanted to mention to you is, again, it'd be great if you could subscribe to the Outsider newsletter on Substack. Go subscribe to me on iTunes. It's the Outsider podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and even it's the Outsider on YouTube. All right. Appreciate your time today. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and thank you very much.